Hello, I'm Steve Boyce, and welcome back to Big Data Week. We're broadcasting live from InExpo Studios in beautiful Chicago, Illinois, and we're excited to have you back for day 2 of our Big Data Week programming. We're going to be streaming live programs on big data topics all day today, so stay tuned to this channel to meet exciting guests and engage with them through chat and live Q&A. We've got a great program set up for you here, and I'm going to be introducing our first speaker in just a second. Before I do want to remind our audience that we do expect and want your participation in our programs here at Big Data Week. So we've enabled a group chat window, which is immediately below the video panel you see on your console. We also have an Ask the Question bar, which is directly below the slide window. Please feel free to use both throughout the programs today so you can engage with our speakers and have a great conversation about great big data topics. Now, I want to go ahead and get to our first speaker today. I'm thrilled to be joined in studio today with Kamal Tahir, who is a senior manager for product management and marketing with Experian, where he leads automotive data product portfolios, including AutoCheck Triggers, and VIN Gateway. Before joining Experian, Kamal led global product commercialization for Nielsen's Business Intelligence application suite. Earlier in his career, Kamal worked as a global business manager at Underwriter Laboratories and worked in Andersen's Strategy Group with a focus on e-business, CRM, SCM, portals, and technology strategy for Fortune 500 clients. Kamal has a certificate in executive leadership from Cornell University, an MBA from Temple University, and a Bachelor of Science in Marketing and Management Information Systems from Emporia State University. He also has a project management certificate from George Washington University and is a pragmatic marketing certified. So we're really excited to have Kamal Tahir here in studio, and he's going to be talking today about a great big data topic around data products. So without any further ado, let me introduce Kamal Tahir. Kamal, take it away.
Thank you very much. So for the audience, yesterday was a good day, number of events. So we're going to have a little bit of fun here in terms of, as you saw the topics, the 7 deadly sins of product innovation, as well as the missing V in big data valuation. So before we start, there is a question here as far as we talked about superheroes. So if you can tell me, which superhero group do you know the most about? Avengers, Justice League, X-Men, or am I the only one who likes superheroes and you say none? So if you can take a couple of minutes, and I assure you that there is a reason for that, and there is a relevance between that and big data. All right. So let's see. Wow, X-Men is winning. Avengers are last. That's surprising, but all right, that's good. So there'll be a couple of other questions as we move forward. And now, as far as the information that you share on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, other social outlets you may have, bulletin boards, email, or even in public settings, conversations, do you share approximately the same information on all those channels? Is there no difference? Is there some difference? Are you quite different across those channels, or you just say, well, Kamal, we really don't feel like telling you that? So if you could give me a quick understanding of what you see, will give you 5 seconds. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Enough time? All right, let's see. So it looks like there's some difference, quite difference, or there's some people who are rightfully so saying I'd rather not disclose. All right, let's move forward. So again, Kamal Tahir, there's my Twitter handles there. So if you need to reach out to me after that, more than happy to connect with anyone and talk. But before we start, let me just quickly tell you what this session is and what the session's not. So we definitely don't have enough time to get into deep analytics of what techniques, tools, software, etc. could be used for big data or unstructured data interrogation. What we are talking about more is strategies around how you build a big data strategy in your current environment, or if you're a data provider or you're looking to bring that in. And then we have only 20 minutes, so let's go. Now, before we move forward, there is one more question because we have 20 minutes. So option A, do you want me to spend more time on what and why? What is big data? Why is it important? Do you really want me to spend more time on the hows? Or do you say, well, option C, well, stop with these poll questions and let's go and start talking about stuff already? All right, so it's a little bit of a divided house here. Interesting. But so we'll try to get through as much as we can. Of course, some of those we can address in Q&A as well. So a little bit of my background, passion, profession, preparation, as I say, and you'll see through the presentation there'll be a number of these. So just basically looking at, as Steve talked about, background-wise, looking at strategy, data technology, analytics to drive real results across all channels, and really doing that through really consumer engagement, acquisition, and retention. Some of the companies that I've been in, essentially Steve talked about it, but my journey with big data or data really started with an extremely unsexy sort of product with Zanica, which is Syngenta now, ag chemicals, working with agricultural fungicide. We were looking at EDI tools to see how we can have that data change the results that we were having. Just really putting focus on that data to see what the levels were at different distributor warehouses for this agricultural fungicides for tomatoes and potatoes. How can we replenish the supply in time before the competitors did? And that had a pretty good effect on our results. As far as some of the places where my parents spent a lot of money sending me to college, they're actually watching today, so I thought I'd just throw that up there. So let's move forward. Do we still have some of the questions that showed up? So let's go back. So the big data equation. One thing that we hear about is fairly, it's like that's volume, it's variety of the data, it's this is really slow velocity, and then of course someone said, well, it's veracity as well, how much it can actually help you, bring the truth in what's happening, and that really results into value. That really shows value, and I completely agree. I think that's true, but there is a big missing V that we will talk about as we go forward in it. Now, so the why portion of why we should really be doing some of the work here as far as big data. So it decreases variance, more information is providing you, it decreases the variance in your analysis. It is increasing the insights that you're getting, and based on that is really giving you, improved results. So why not do that? Also, when we're looking at some current trends that we start seeing as far as data growth and the growth in the economy, the data or capabilities to do certain things. So what we really see is that the economy right now is, the data is growing 4 times the speed of global economy, which is kind of an interesting thing if you really think about how fast the global economy is growing, especially with some of the developing countries. And the other interesting part really is that the processing power in the same time is increasing, 9 times the speed of the economy. So I mean, for me it's very simple that you say, okay, economy is growing at a certain rate. My capability to potentially do more with that is increasing much faster with data and processing. So why not use that as a competitive advantage? So now let's talk a little bit about something I'd come up with a number of years ago, which is really a framework to figure out how can we really look at products and define products. So OCDIX, so people call me obsessive compulsive at times when it comes to products. I am. But really it starts framing the question of, well, O is who's the owner? What are the objectives? What's the outcome that they are really trying to get? And in terms of big data environment, we really start talking about what are the observations? What is the data telling us? Of course, it has to be in the context of the objectives and outcomes. And then when we talk about the C, so that's the capability, capacity, competency. Can you do it? Do you have the capability to do it? Do you have the capacity to do it currently? What else you could be working on in terms of other projects? And then of course for the client itself, just because you're building an internal or external client, do they have the capability to work on it, the capacity to work on it? Will you build something and it'll sit there? And there are experiences that we've had where in my career that we've built products for clients and they've sit on the shelf because while it was important when they talked to us, they didn't have capacity to actually implement them. And of course at renewal time they say, well, we didn't see the value in it, and then you start talking about, well, basically it was because you didn't really implement it in time. The D part, of course, it's data, it's devices, it's delivery mechanism. So, what data do you need? What do you have? What devices will people be using? What's the delivery mechanism? Is it, a FTP? Is it, XML? Is it going to be people accessing it through devices online? So different things. I is where all of us who are listening, we're the secret sauce. So the implementation part comes in, the inspiration, the insights that different skill sets bring in. And the X really is the X factor, which is, well, what's the value of this thing that we're doing? So we're going to skip through some of this or go a little faster in the interest of time. So really, as I said, you really have to understand who your customers are, what they need, what levers do they currently have, and is the role of the data to give them more levers or really give them a better ability to deal with the current levers that they have. Also, as I talked about users type, usage style, that's really important because you have to understand how that person will be using it, what their approach is. When I was at Nielsen at that time, we built a product with our business intelligence suite, which was fantastic. I mean, it was one of the greatest products in the industry and still is in my view. But what happened is we built some certain things that for the executive users, they were a little bit, they would not be going into a portal to look at it. And then for some of the analyst levels, even though the capability was pretty superior, it didn't give them the flexibility that they wanted to do ad hoc analysis. So in terms of this big data solution, two of our really successful products were that we came up with an automatic PowerPoint builder that would create the PowerPoints that these executives needed and really just deliver it to them in their mailbox at a defined interval. They loved it. And for analysts, we really created a product that would give them a little bit more of a query capabilities. And aside from all the guided roadmap analytics that we had, which were all question-based, those were among the two hit things, again, because when we're looking at what the customers wanted, we realized after launching it that there were certain things that we needed to meet that they were used to in their previous experience. So success, as I mentioned earlier, and I'll just really go through it very quickly, it is the competency capability that both on your side and as well on your client side, again, internal or external client, what can they do? Do they have the time to do it? And as far as the complexity goes on both sides and constraints, the data sometimes you get, there are constraints on usage, there are regulatory constraints, there are other things that come into play. And then complexity and constraints on the client side, maybe that requires that you have more of an advisory or consulting time. And if you don't know that you've delivered a product that really is intended to give them the insights that they need, but they don't have the capacity in their organization to implement that. So we have to be careful about that. The question again is, so can it be built? Should I build it? And Icarus comes to mind, can the wings with wax be built? Sure. Should he really build it and fly? Well, we found out what happened to him, right? So the other question, with data, people say, well, what are some of the techniques? There's just so much really going on in terms of, methodologies that exist. But what I really say is, well, let's augment what you're doing. There are processes in place, there are insights that you're driving from current processes. So the new data sources, unstructured data sources that you're bringing in, really augment your current processes to answer the questions you currently answer. Now, if you figure out that you need to answer other questions, more type of answers that you need, then you supercharge that, you combine the data sources, because at times, the what versus when and why different sources are coming in, that gives you quite a bit of insight. And then especially for people who are looking at creating, they are creators of data, well, can you extend the use of that data, and can it do other things that initially you weren't thinking it could do, but now that you have a capability, just think about the usage of that. One question when it comes again for data is, well, what should I do, especially if I'm providing it to clients? Well, and what we have to be cognizant as buyers as well as sellers of data or data-related products is there are a number of costs that we have and a number of costs that the clients have. There's a cost for the data itself. There's a cost for storage, because people just look at data and say it's free. Even if it's free and you're getting it from some source and just capturing it, then there's the people who are managing it. All the analysts, everyone who's involved with the boxes and pipes. And then security, we're looking at maintenance of data. Of course, data itself changes based on, especially with unstructured data, the usage that you're getting, the user composition of the source. So you have to be on top of that. And really, what else could you have been doing? Are there other data sources that instead of that you could have had? Because there is, storage is cheap, but still there's a finite capacity of what certain thing can hold, and your costs, of course, you have to factor that in play as well. And it has to give you a value. So as I basically, it's a balance between don't litter. So if you have data, don't throw it, because if you're generating it, if you're not using it today, you may use it tomorrow. And just because, and if you throw it away, you'll not have, we're talking about big data, but also the long data, as far as you will not have the historical information there. But at the same time, aside from the don't litter, we also say don't hoard. Just because you have it doesn't mean you keep holding on to it. The example that I give sometimes is that if instead of data, if I was providing material and you're buying plastics from me and you say, Kamal, send me 10 tons of plastic on a weekly basis. Oh, by the way, you sell rubber also. Can you send me some, 5 tons of rubber? Okay, great. So 15 tons of material shows up in your warehouse. You use the plastic, the rubber sits there. Now, if someone from executive from the company walks by the warehouse and says, okay, tell me why there's this big mountain of rubber sitting here. Well, we're getting it from Kamal's providing it, and we're just going to get it. They'll say, well, it's just taking up space for no reason. Can we get rid of it? And by the way, how much are we paying this guy for this 15 tons of, plastic and rubber? Oh, we pay him $10,000 a month. Fine, tell him to stop sending the rubber and let's renegotiate. So the stuff that we're just giving for free ends up costing money in the end. So just be cognizant of adding things into it. So again, big data is really for big challenges. So one of the key things that I mentioned is look beyond the labels. Big, tall, long, venti, grande, petite, whatever label comes. The idea really is that big problems are going to take a longer time to solve. There's a higher period to get ROI. So really look at evolutionary gains. If you're hitting some of the quicker solutions, quicker problems, that's really self-funding for some of the larger problems you'll be solving, and that is going to be attractive to a lot of companies, whether again you're solving problems for the market or internally for your company. So now let's, as I said, so it's just data for challenges. Let's look beyond the labels. So now let's talk about the 7 deadly sins of data products. Applies to a lot of products, but data products, I'm sure you'll enjoy it, and we've probably all been in that space. So number one is really not knowing your customer. What do they want? You build something, you don't really have an idea of what really needs to be done there. Number two is not leaving something that's good enough, well enough, just leave it. Just continue to work on it, even though it's really doing what it's supposed to do. Then it's like treating anything as a magic pill. I mean, we've seen all these things with my experience with ERP, CRM, SEM. Everything seems like a magic pill, but it's not. There are processes and things that have to be in place. Building for one versus building for many, which is you either go and you solve one client's problem, but it's so specific that it really cannot be applied to the rest of the industry, or that was your pilot client and you built it. Now you're trying to you kind of shoehorn it to the rest of the industry, and that doesn't work. Then, of course, overbuild product, looking at all things as critical, all the data. Just because I have this data, I have to use it because what's going to make it better? Well, if it's giving you 80%, 85% confidence, and you're going to spend 50% more effort on building it, does it really need to be done? And then this is something that we all fall into, which is the intellectual gymnastics. Look, it's an intellectual challenge. We really get excited about it, but is there value in the amount of effort we're spending in something that's personally important to us? Is there market value to that? And nothing to say about intellectual curiosity, and we should be doing it, but at the same time, let's balance that. And I don't think in big data, Al Pacino or Scarface has been mentioned so far. So one of my favorite quotes is from that movie is, "Don't get high on your own supply," which is just because you have it, just because you have the capability, should you really build it? I mean, we talked about Icarus, we talked about other things where you can build it and your clients will not use it. So that becomes a little bit of a challenge. Then we start talking about who really do we need in a team. And we really need a broad set of skills. I mean, you're looking at data scientists, you're looking at people who have business acumen, and it's really hard to find it in one person. And that's the reason that when we asked the question earlier about as far as, which is your favorite superhero team, that's going to come up now. Actually, it's basically the question is, if these guys, when you look at Avengers or Justice League or X-Men, that if these guys needed teams, surely we need a team as well, whether it's the quantitative sciences, operations, strategies, maths, quant, stats, apps, pipes. So basically, when you start talking about Ferris Bueller, everyone loved him. So this is the same thing here, which you have to have all these types of people with different skills who really need to be involved to really make something out of this new capability, new sources that you have of information. And the last thing I'll close at what I said in the very beginning. What's the missing V? We talked about volume, variety, velocity is value. And the big missing V here is that when I asked the question, are we sharing the same information across all channels? And we really saw a mix between yes and no, really veering more towards the no. And what that really is showing is there's a vacuum, meaning if you're looking at certain channels or certain areas, there is a gap in information. You cannot treat that as this is all the information, and so the insights that I'm drawing from it, that is the truth. There is definite insight, there is value, but for us to do that, we have to understand what is the vacuum, and that's what as professionals, as in this field, we have to really focus on. And that's where when we talked about having the team that could really do it, to drive the value from it, what bridges the gap between these items as far as value and the vacuum, and that really is the vision that team brings, not an individual, the team, because of the different views on the market, the data sources that they have, the analytical capabilities and skills that they have. So really, this is kind of out of time here, but really going back, two things that I'll just say. If you remember anything from this presentation, you're going through this for a week, just the vacuum in this equation, please remember that, and really just OCDIX as I walk through it, observations, the correlations, don't treat them as necessarily anything more than correlations, the discovery capability. So let's start looking at it, and again, know the users and the goals, call out the limitations, because if you don't call out, eventually they will be called out. And really, you can read the other things, but now to mention another pop culture reference, use the force, because in the end is the innovation, is the insights that we're bringing. In the end, Steve Jobs didn't really need any data to build the iPhone. Just remember that. So data and insights are important, but our intuition is kind of goes beyond that. So just really quickly, I think that's kind of my general talk. I just wanted to thank International Data Week, City of Chicago, Sebastian, and my parents for buying me Monopoly and my first computer that built the interest in both the business side of things and technology side of things.
Kamal, thank you so much. It's a fantastic presentation. Some really compelling, thought-provoking insights I think you've brought to the discussion here today, and we've got some great questions from our audience I want to get to. The first one, you've touched, this is actually coming from Fred. You've touched on a number of projects that you've worked on. You obviously worked on launching a number of data-based projects. Coming back to your 7 deadly sins, Kamal, I want to sort of ask, or Fred wants to ask, what of those 7 do you think is the most potentially damaging or destabilizing to a big data sort of centric initiative?
In my view, looking at that as a magic pill. Look, big data is not the only part that this has happened. And if people have time, they can look at the blog post I wrote on International Big Data Week site. Before big data, right now we're looking through the whole digital strategy. Prior to that, we looked at the dot-com thing that happened late 90s. And the challenge was we looked at something as saying, well, this is going to solve our problems. And this thing was never really implemented throughout the organization. It was an enterprise-wide culture. So just bringing a tool set in or bringing another capability in and thinking it's going to solve something is really, really damaging, because what ends up happening is the expectations are really high. The people who are coming into those positions to really meet those expectations, they're really set for failure, because unless the whole organization, the enterprise is behind it, and there's a strategy, there's simply no way that's going to meet the high expectations of treating it like a magic pill, silver bullet or a magic pill.
Very good, Kamal. And I think that's a potential pitfall that we can all fall into, which is expecting that this is a panacea for all our challenges and the data will lead us to success regardless of what we're looking at. So Can you share a couple of insights just to kind of extend that on how, from an organizational perspective, can companies and organizations, how can they manage scope for these types of projects and ensure that they have the right types of skill sets in that initiative so they have a balanced approach, that it's not overly focused on the data, but that it is focused on driving business objectives and value creation?
Sure, Steve. There's two things. First of all, depending on the size of the organization, don't get me wrong, I think there is value to have a separate channel, a separate strategy started where it could be removed from the organization to test the concepts out, but that's what you have to understand, that at some point in time the learnings from them have to really then be taken to the rest of the organization to really drive the benefits. But then when we look at the team really has to be empowered. They have to be given the tools and assets that they need, and there has to be balance in the team, because otherwise there'll be lopsided teams, you're going to get lopsided results. So in this case, a data scientist is critical. This is the person who's going to look at data and say what the data is telling us. But that's real deep data science. Do I need someone with, especially if I'm dealing with consumer behavioral, kind of background, that they can actually bring more of a consumer view on it as far as what is this telling us and the whys, because the data really starts telling us the what happened, or when it happened. But the how really is a big science of putting those two together. But then really the question is, okay, so you know what happened, why, and when it happened, potentially why it's happening, but is it really solving my problem? So that's the part where you're talking about having the people with the business and operational expertise who are saying, well, these are the problems that we've been trying to solve, and bringing those and kind of saying which problems do you prioritize solving in which way. And again, not to take anything away from my technical friends in the middle, which is you have to have the right tool set. You have to have those capabilities to let the scientists, the data scientists, work with these data sets using the right tools and having access to the systems. So that's why you have to build. And if you're missing any of those, there are going to be issues for you.
Very good. And Kamal, we've got time for, unfortunately, only just one more question. Wish we had more time to spend with you today, but hopefully we can bring you back on a future program here. But final question from Jane. She likes the series of costs that you outlined that are relevant to these types of projects. And Jane's question is it important to establish an ROI target or an ROI sort of methodology for a big data initiative, just like you would for any other type of project?
Yes, ROI is critical. I mean, what that saves you from is really going into directions that really are dead ends or waste. It has to be balanced fairly carefully, though, because in some of these new initiatives, there is time for discovery, and we talked about that, which is we have to understand what types of data could help us, but at the same time, it may not. So you have to kind of fail early, fail fast. With this empowered team, give them the assets, but at the same time, if something is really not driving the results that you think is not giving the insights, then stop using it. And that's going to, and the effectiveness of that team or the effort, really, ROI is how we're measured. So we have to set that in the very beginning that there is an ROI for the program. There is a cost for investment as well, because all of our innovation type things, and that's a challenge, really cannot be measured the same way as existing products, existing programs with a certain ROI, because there's a higher level of investment required. So the ROI discussion is definitely critical in the beginning, but let's make sure that the ROI is looking at it from an R&D innovation investment perspective, and not just that this is a product that I get a certain ROI each year, that I'm expecting the same ROI. It will give additional returns as time moves forward, but you have to make the investment.
Very good. Excellent advice, Kamal, and fantastic program. Thank you so much, Kamal Tahir, for joining us here in InExpo Studios to kick off our second day of live streaming here at Big Data Week Chicago. And what a great presentation that was, folks. Some really thought-provoking insights and suggestions from our expert, Kamal Tahir. Please note that his presentation slides are posted in your webcast console, so you can download those and refresh your memory of those great insights and information that he's provided. You'll also see Kamal's contact information on the slide, so please feel free to reach out to him and check out his blog post at bigdataweek.com. Folks, we've got a fantastic program lineup for you today, a jam-packed schedule with some great expert guests. We'll say goodbye to Kamal Tahir for today and thank him for his great presentation. But stay tuned on this channel. In about 10 minutes, we'll be back with Andrew Oliver, and he'll help us figure out which freaking database should I use. So stay tuned for that great program. More from Big Data Week Chicago coming up next.